there's so much anxiety right now, so much fear. It's not our fault. Like, we are being fed all these, fear-based messages about parenting, whether it's like, social media is going to cause our kids to become murderers, or nobody can get into college anymore, and my kid is going to, end up on the street. It's coming at us from like every possible direction.
Yeah.
And we know that like mom anxiety is at an all-time high right now. So it's like, even if you argue that like things aren't that bad right now compared with generations past, the fact is parents are hyper anxious right now.
Right. And the thing that I always come across is this feeling that like there is no way to do it right. There's so much messaging about like parents are too up in their kids' business. They're doing too much. Like, stop parenting so much. But then at the same time, if you take your foot off the gas, there's so many messages telling you that that is also bad parenting, right? So like everything is bad parenting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's like, it's impossible, I think, to be a parent right now because, the minute you try to sort of challenge any of the norms, then other parents are judging you.
Yep.
Sometimes like maybe the cops will be called because your kid is in the park alone. Like, there's all these forces that are working against you, trying to push against some of the norms that you might think are not necessary or particularly helpful. And so it's like we're just stuck, in this like cycle of like, not being able to get out of the sort of over-parenting hamster cycle, even if we want to.
Hi, everyone. This is the Culture Study Podcast, and I'm Anne Helen Peterson.
I'm Melinda Wenner-Moyer, and I am the author of Hello, Cruel World, Science-Based Strategies for Raising Terrific Kids in Terrifying Times.
How did you get started thinking about parenting? It's like you did not conceive of yourself as a parenting journalist.
No. No. For a long time, I was like a straight science journalist. I have a degree in cell and molecular biology. I was writing about immunology and genetics and all these like super nerdy things. And then I had a kid. And I was like, oh, I have so many questions and I don't know how to answer them. And I would go on Google and like everything would conflict. And I basically said, I wonder if science can help me. Like, I wonder if science can make me a better parent. So I started writing a column for Slate that was like a science-based parenting column. It was their first parenting column. And then I still kind of resisted. I was like, I'm not a parenting writer. And I think part of that was also like, there's a sort of sexism, like you're taken seriously if you're a science journalist and you're writing for like Scientific American and stuff. And then the minute you're like, oh, I write about parenting, it's like, oh, now you're a mommy blogger and, you're not taken seriously. So I really resisted for a while. And then basically I think Trump was elected and I was like, okay, I want to write more about both how we can raise good kids who can like change the world. And also I wanted to push against the like anti-scientific fear-mongering messaging that we get all the time as parents. And so I also started a Substack, that tries to bring science and nuance to parenting advice and like push back against these harmful narratives.
I think some people are, even if they don't know your name, they're maybe familiar with the concept of like, how do we not raise kids that are assholes? And like, even that idea, right? Acknowledging that like sometimes your kid is an asshole, I think is still very much part of like a contemporary wave of parenting that like kids aren't angels, right? They are human beings in the process of becoming. And sometimes like it's really, really hard to be their parents. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, no, I mean, I always joke that my book title is, it's not how to raise kids who aren't assholes as kids. It's how to raise kids who aren't assholes as adults. That's because true. All That's kids true. Are assholes. Like, it's just, I mean, they have to be like, they don't know social norms. They don't know etiquette yet. They have to learn it by making the mistakes. Their brains are not fully formed. Like impulse control, it doesn't fully develop until like age 25. There are all these reasons why kids act like assholes. And it's really hard to be a parent. So I think I also really work to normalize like the difficulty of being a parent, especially a mom right now, and like, acknowledging and sort of picking apart all the pressures that are on moms that are unreasonable and sexist and, everything.
Yes.
Like we can't do it all, but we're expected to do it all. It's hard to be a parent. It is.
So I feel like we could do 800 episodes on this topic and we got at least 800 questions. But we wanted to pick questions that were pretty broad and that would allow us to go to a lot of different places. And then for the Ask and Anything segment at the end, we're going to paywall that. We're going to go deep on something that we got so many questions about, and that's kids' sports. Like, I would say half the questions had something to do with kids' sports. So our first question is going to start us more on a philosophical note. This comes from Meredith.
What even is a good parent anymore? I feel a pull towards a return to a more unscheduled, laid-back approach to parenting, while also feeling the pressure to micromanage and overschedule both my kids, ages 7 and 2. I try to maintain the maxim that the less stressed and calmer I am, the better mother I am, but I still can't shake the feeling that I should be doing more! ! As context, I am a white, married, cishet woman. I work outside the home 25 to 40 hours a week, depending on my workload, and generally shoulder the majority of home management tasks and family mental load.
So, I mean, this is it, right? Like, this is the heart of it. And I think that this idea of like parenting is always more is really interesting. And I know you know all the data about how, like, when women started going into the paid workforce, or when more women, significantly more women started going into the paid workforce, their parenting hours actually increased.
Yep. No, it's totally crazy. Yeah. I mean, I also just like want to highlight her kids are 7 and 2, and she's already feeling this pressure to schedule her kids, you know,
Right.
like 2-year-olds, right? Like, what is going on? But I completely empathize with her because I feel it too, like we all do. So yeah, Meredith says, like, I can't shake this feeling that I'm supposed to be doing more all the time. And that's because that is what everything and everyone is telling her to do and telling all of us to do.
Yeah.
So intensive parenting, intensive mothering, whatever you want to call it, is this idea that we should be pouring as many resources as possible into our kids' development. This is now the norm and expectation among all social classes. So it used to be that just among like upper middle class and upper class parents, there was this belief that, we should be putting as much money, as much time, as much effort into like making sure our kids are optimized. Now, every social class believes that they should be doing this. And this is documented in the research.
Yeah.
So it's pervasive. And I mean, our rising economic inequality is making it worse because we know, again, from research that in regions where there's more income inequality, privileged parents spend more money relatively on their kids. So it's like, it's all rooted in this fear that if we don't go the extra mile with our kids, they will not succeed and they will have so far to fall. But I think what one of like the central tension she's getting at here too is that like the cultural messages we're getting about what good parenting is are very different from what the research on parenting and child outcomes tells us is good parenting. And so this is why I do what I do, because I'm like, okay, we're hearing all this. Let me see what the research says. Like maybe it's not as scary or as, overwhelming as we think it is. And it often isn't, because we know that like overprotective, over-involved parenting, helicopter parenting, snowplow parenting, whatever you want to call it, is actually not linked with child success or child well-being. It's actually like the research suggests that the more overbearing parents are, the less motivated their kids are, the less well they do in school. And that like there's also really, really concerning research on academic pressure on kids and how closely tied that is with poor mental health, with a higher risk for substance use. So all these things that we think are really central to good parenting can actually backfire and not be good for kids and certainly aren't good for us. And we know too, and we're going to get into sports and extracurriculars, but like we also know that once kids exceed about 10 hours a week of activities, the benefits really kind of start to wane, and then stress and fatigue and burnout start to matter. So yeah, what we're being told to do is not actually like what's necessarily good for our kids, definitely not good for us. And I also think though, it's not just about like what our culture tells us to do. It's about identity, like the identity of what it is to be a mom. And I feel like,
Yep. And a mama, specifically.
A mama, yes, exactly. A mama. Like, to be a good mom, a mama is to be a woman who sacrifices everything for her kids, who does the majority of the domestic labor, who never loses her temper, all these things that are actually totally impossible to all do. But when we don't measure up to these ideals, then we feel this sense of failure, we feel this sense of shame. And it's, this certainly doesn't serve us, and it doesn't benefit our kids. Who does it serve? I say it serves men. Like, mom guilt serves men, and ensures that moms stay home and busy and taking care of their kids and giving men more freedom and power. But maybe I'm launching it too.
No, I totally agree. More time to have leisure activities, like all sorts of things, and to pursue things that they think are interesting. It's one of those things that I think a lot of like feminist, progressive women, it's like beauty standards, right? You're like, I know in my heart that all of this is bullshit, and yet all of this ideological messaging still makes me like contradicts my cerebral understanding of like, this is not good parenting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Even if you know it in your brain,
yes,
but to actually accept it and do something different is so hard. And I see it sometimes, like when I talk to mom friends and they give me advice, they can give me the advice that's like, oh, it's totally fine for you to, go off to do something without your kids and leave them home alone and like, don't have any mom guilt. And then when the situation is reversed, they're like, oh my God, I can't do this thing. I feel so much guilt. And I'm like, wow, like they can, they can recognize it and give the advice for other moms. But when it comes to them, their standards for themselves are like way up here, so much higher. And it's so hard to do. It really is.
It also strikes me that there's something to do with just, especially in our country, like we understand better as always additive, like doing more. Something like exercise. It's really difficult to conceive of rest as part of exercise.
Yeah.
As a necessary part of like building a stronger body or being stronger just generally. And so to understand part of good parenting as doing less is a really difficult concept to get our heads around.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. I mean, just the way our culture works, like capitalism and our individualism, like we think more is always better in every regard. And that is not true. It's just not true.
Today's episode is sponsored by Raw Signal Group. If you're a leader at a nonprofit, you're asked to do more with less all the time. It's a burnout gig made worse by the fact that most nonprofit leaders don't get any training on how to run their teams in the first place. If you want more predictability, more calm, more confidence as a leader, I strongly recommend Raw Signal Group's management training. It's led by friends of the pod, Melissa and Jonathan Nightingale, and they've helped leaders all over the world build thriving teams without burning themselves out, and they always set aside discounted seats for nonprofit organizations. So if you're a manager doing good in the world and you want a better toolkit for how you're showing up for your community, go to worldsbestmanagementtraining.com. Seriously, that's the URL. It's great to find out more and reach out to them. Just a quick note that they really are friends of the pod, and I've done multiple interviews with Melissa and Jonathan. We will put a link in the show notes. They are awesome. The Culture Study podcast is sponsored by Blueland. So in case you missed it, the EPA just banned 2 cancer-causing chemicals, and there is a good chance that they're in a ton of your cleaning products. Don't take chances with your family or your pets or your health. Switch your old cleaning products for Blueland. They're EPA Safer Choice certified, so you can trust that they only use safe, clean, and effective ingredients. Blueland is on a mission to eliminate single-use plastic by reinventing cleaning essentials to be better for you and the planet with the same powerful clean you're used to. Basically, you have the containers, and then you have these tablets that you put into the containers. And this is for like your window spray, your all-purpose cleaner, and then you add water, and then it just works. It's also cheaper because you're not paying for like that whole plastic bottle anymore. And refill tablets start at just $2.25. You can get even more savings by buying refills in bulk or setting up a subscription. Blueland products are independently tested to perform alongside major brands and are free from dyes, bleach, and harsh chemicals. Blueland is trusted in over 1 million homes, including mine and Melody's.
I have to say, we've been having issues with our previous dishwasher tablets,
Unnamed
unnamed dishwasher tablets that are not dissolving and leaving lots of crust on the dishes, which is like a true phobia of mine. I start gagging and crying a little bit.
Oh yeah,
and
like
Bobby
the taste of the tablets is so gross.
No. Like dried food is left on the quote unquote washed dishes. But since we switched to Blue Land, we are not having this issue, and I'm not gagging and crying while I'm emptying the dishwasher.
Love it. We love Melody.
I'm not even exaggerating.
We love Melody not to gag and cry while she empties the dishwasher. So you can make the switch today and get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/culture. You don't want to miss this. blueland.com/culture for 15% off. That's blueland.com/culture to get 15% off. Okay, our next question is something that I am so fascinated with. So I cannot wait for us to unpack this more. It's about a major buzzword in parenting. Because I don't even know if it's I think it's a trend. We'll see how you describe it. Let's hear from Zoe and see if we can unpack it.
I'm curious about the origins and purported benefits of the type of language I associate with gentle parenting, or at least the parenting style I see practiced in the educated San Francisco circles that I travel in. In my experience, beyond eschewing imperative statements and the word no, it seems to focus a lot on body awareness and whether things feel safe. It also seems to really center the child and their experience, and at times ignore the negative impact the child might have on other people. An example, I was at a crowded party with kids and parents in a small backyard. One little boy was kicking a soccer ball into the crowd. Instead of saying, "Don't do that, you're going to annoy people," the boy's mother told him that what he was doing didn't feel safe. It wasn't dangerous behavior, but it was annoying. Similarly, I was at the playground recently and saw a kid hit his mom in the face with a toy, and she said, "That doesn't feel good on my body." Why not say, "You're hurting me," or "That's going to bother people"? For what it's worth, I have a 3-year-old, and I think it's important to teach her that her actions can impact others in a negative or positive way, and that her feelings aren't always the most important thing, and I often feel a little unusual in that respect. Also, I just find this language a bit weird and creepy, and so I would love to hear your and the guest's thoughts.
Okay, so we're talking about gentle parenting discourse language. Like, some of this is explicitly gentle parenting. Some of it is kind of like downstream from gentle parenting. Can you define it for us?
Oh, gosh. The
look on your face when I said that.
Define it. Okay. Oh, God. I see so much variation when it comes to gentle parenting. I mean, I follow some gentle parenting accounts, and it's all over the board. I know there was an original definition. But I don't think it's one particular thing anymore.
Yeah.
So that's part of the problem, I think. This really struck a chord for me, and I cannot agree more with Zoe on how we should be telling our kids that's annoying behavior. So, I sometimes think of gentle parenting as it's not rooted in research. It's rooted in theory and ideas. And I think sometimes it's rooted in what can make moms feel the most guilty and stressed. Because it does seemingly prioritize the child over everyone and everything else. And I do think that that's a core part of it is ensuring that children are always feeling safe and loved all the time. That's, I guess, how I would sort of define the way gentle parenting operates. It's really centered on what can parents do to just make children feel loved and valued and safe all the time. And of course, it is so important to make sure our kids feel loved. But I don't agree that we should, ensure that our kids feel comfortable all the time, or safe particularly. It's actually imperative for us to make sure our kids are feeling some of this discomfort and unease and disappointment, sadness. All these negative feelings are so important for kids to experience regularly in a safe environment, because that's how they learn what feelings are and what they feel like. It's how they learn to recognize feelings in other people and become more compassionate. And it's how they learn coping skills that they'll use their whole lives to, manage the various feelings they're going to have. So as I was saying earlier, I'm really interested in what we can do to raise compassionate and kind and generous kids, and also mentally healthy kids. And I feel with some of the gentle parenting messaging I get, it sort of implies that these things are at odds. in order to preserve kids' mental health, you need to make sure they never feel any guilt or never feel, anything bad about their behavior. But that's not true.
Well, and we're responsible for our actions, right? Like that's how the world works.
That's the truth, right?
Yes.
And we need our kids to know that. So there's a really interesting area of research that I feel like nobody talks about. It's from the 60s. It's a form of discipline called inductive discipline. And I came across it when I was researching my first book, How to Raise Kids Who Aren't Assholes. And there's a lot of research on it, and it suggests that like one of the most important things we can do to raise more compassionate kids is to directly tie their choices and their actions to the effects that those choices and actions have on other people, especially on other people's feelings. So it's like the difference between, you can do it in so many ways, but like for me, it's like if I step on a Lego that my kid has left on the floor, and I could just say like, don't leave your Legos on the floor. But instead, it's like, okay, let's tie their choice to leave the Legos on the floor with the outcome it led to, which is, so you might say like, please don't leave your Legos on the floor. I just stepped on one and it really hurt me.
Yeah.
And I think gentle parenting people might say that's not okay because you're making your kid feel bad for something that they did. But there's a really big difference between guilt and shame. And you want your kids to recognize that what they do every day, like the choices they're making, do have effects on others. And it's really funny. Like I dug into this in my Substack once, like I came across a meme on Instagram that was like, never tell your kid that they're making you feel a certain way because that is, terrible parenting. And I called up like 5 psychologists and I was like, tell me, please, like, is this true? And they were like, oh my God, no. Of course we should be telling, like, it is fine to tell your kids that they're affecting you. You want to do it in a way that is not like shaming them for their feelings or making them feel like they're responsible for your well-being. But you can absolutely, and you should absolutely say like, oh my, your screaming is so loud it's hurting my ears. Or, when you hit me, it hurts. Like that is totally okay to do, as long as you're not doing it in, a super shamey, angry, way that's going to make them feel like terrible people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is just a really big misconception that it's bad to do this.
It reminds me too of part of like the original sociological definition of intensive parenting. One of the like many attributes, and we'll link to various resources on this, but is that it's child-centered.
Yes.
Like
yes.
that the parents rotate around the kid. Like the child is the center of the universe, which is a significant shift from basically every other time in our like child rearing history, right? And even like a very recent shift. And even, like you pointed to the fact that now people of all different classes understand this type of parenting as ideal parenting. And as recent as like the 1980s and 1990s, like it's still like that hadn't affected all different classes yet. Like it was still like, well, that's how rich people parent, and that's bullshit, right?
Yep.
But this idea that the child is at the center and that their emotions and safety and well-being should be preserved above all others. And sometimes that means in practice that it's not just above their parents, but above everyone else in that crowd where like the ball was getting kicked into it. And I think that that's part of what strikes people as odd, is just this idea like, oh, we're privileging this kid's needs above everything else, and that it tilts everyone's world in a way that I think can be really difficult, and especially difficult for people who aren't even raising kids, right? Like at the heart of a lot of these conversations of my mom friends never hang out with me anymore because I'm not a mom, is this idea that the mom should always be privileging the kid over her friendship or friendships just generally, or her hobbies or her identity. Just this incredible effacing of self that is at the heart of like martyred motherdom.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think also there's a confusion between like how we handle kids' feelings and how we handle their behavior.
Yeah.
Like we can, and I think we should welcome like, and try to be comfortable around our kids' like big feelings, but we can set limits on like what they do when they have those feelings. And I feel like gentle parenting kind of muddles these things. And it's like, well, everything should be okay. And we should, welcome every kind of behavior. And it's, we don't want to make our kids feel bad for acting out or whatever it is. But actually, like, you can say that their feelings are normal and okay and welcome, but that like how they express them or what they do when they feel them, there are limits around that. And I feel like there's just a confusion about that.
Just a quick side note about the language. I think some of it too that strikes people as odd is just that it's different than like our parents ever parented us. So the other day, I was at my friend's house and her son, who is in kindergarten, came in and he was with another kid and they were just like flopping all over the place. And she was like, okay, if you want to do big body motions, like big body movements, that's in the basement. If you want to do small body movements, you can do it here. And I laughed so hard in the moment, but it really worked. They were like, do you want to go down to the basement and do big body motions? Like, go down.
That's amazing.
But like that works.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. There is definitely a shift in how we talk about things with kids and very different from how we were parented. Yeah.
Okay, next question is about dynamic between generations when it comes to raising kids. Oh my gosh. And this just reminds me of our mutual friend, Virginia, and how she talks a lot about like this tension with grandparents and diet culture and how it comes into raising kids and grandkids. So let's hear from Jenna.
How much of the tension between millennial parents and their baby boomer parents during early parenting years is a normal part of generational change? And how much is specific to this moment, with millennial parents drawing on new information sources like parenting data, podcasts, and books like Emily Oster's, while their parents came of age with more centralized guidance like Dr. Spock? For example, when I had my first child, my mom and I disagreed constantly over things like screen time and sleep safety, and she admitted to feeling like my choices were a critique of how she raised me. I'm wondering how common that dynamic is, and if it's less generational and more just the natural evolution of the relationship between parents and their grown children.
It's a great question.
It really is.
It really is. And I will start out by saying it's not one that we have like good data on. I wish there were like studies that have, over the course of many generations tried to really parse this. And I don't think they exist. And so I do think that there's, of course, always been tension between generations as caregiving trends naturally shift.
Yeah.
I have this memory of my grandmother offering my older sister a cigarette when my sister was like 12 and like my parents losing their minds over it. And like, so clearly there were differences in ideas about child rearing between my parents and my grandparents. Right. But I think that there is something, I think that parenting norms today are very, very different from those of our parents when we were growing up. And I would venture to say, and I don't know whether these changes are truly larger, but they certainly feel that way in so many realms. And I think, honestly, a lot of it does have to do with science evolving because, like, you think about just child physical safety, like we put babies to sleep in cribs very differently than when, our parents were parenting us because we know more about safe sleep. And we have car seats and kids travel in cars very differently because we know much more about safety there. And I think that, I just read this great book, The Good Mother Myth by Nancy Reddy.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
It's right. It's so good. And she talks about how like science did shape our parents' beliefs about parenting. It wasn't always good science that they were getting. But now I think, science very much affects us and we have a lot more data and research on child development. And so like how we discipline has really changed. We now have like more authoritative parenting, like more give and take, like listening to your kids, but also setting rules, being warm, but like negotiating. Sometimes permissive parenting, I see a lot of that too. Whereas like our parents tended to be more authoritarian in their parenting style, which was like much more strict and less warm and more overbearing, more control. Discipline has changed. You mentioned Virginia Soul-Smith, like the way we feed our kids is so different for a lot of parents than how we were fed. Like I don't force my kids to eat their vegetables before they have dessert, that kind of thing. And like what we talk about with our kids is so different. So like,
yeah,
there's just so much. I was thinking about like how, and a lot of it is changed because, there are many reasons, but I may be like one of these people who thinks science is responsible for everything. But like, I think about how we talk to kids about race now and how progressive parents talk to kids about race. And that's very different from this colorblind parenting that our parents had when, our parents my parents avoided talking about race because they thought, well, if you don't talk about race, kids won't notice it. They won't become racist. And now the research shows like the opposite is kind of true. And if we, kids notice race from a young age, and if we don't talk to them about it, then they try to understand like the power differences in the world that exist due to race. And the easiest explanation for them is like, well, white people are just smarter or more powerful. We have to talk to them to explain like, well, no, it's racism, it's structural. So there's just so many ways in which parenting has shifted. And so I do think that makes perfect sense why there's much more disagreement now. Like again, I don't know how much of it is truly greater than it used to be in previous generations, but it does feel as if it's big. And I think there's a good reason it feels like it's big.
Well, and just norms are never fixed, right?
Yeah.
Like our thinking about breastfeeding has changed so much. Our thinking about what labor should look like has changed so much. Like
so much.
When kids should be out of the home, when they should be working, like all sorts of things like that. For me, it's just always a good reminder that like what we think is absolutely right now is going to be interrogated and destabilized over the course of the next generation. So like you can't be too absolutely fixed on any one of these things. Like you're like, this is what we think is the best way to do it right now. Right?
Yeah, right. It can absolutely shift. And I mean, and so I do think too, in some ways, like some of the choices we are making collectively, like in over parenting our kids, we might actually, maybe we should listen to the grandparents a little bit on some of these things, like, because we have, I think, gone too far in certain directions and we're making choices that aren't great for us or our kids. And so I do think like, even though we might feel like, well, we have much more evidence that we should do it this way now for all sorts of things, we are not always like we are following trends that are not always helpful. And I think sometimes our parents' perspective might be helpful and maybe we should listen a little to what they're saying.
Yeah. What do you do with that piece of the question when it's like, well, you not doing this thing that I did when I parented you means that you're like rejecting or interrogating my parenting of you? Like the personal, the kind of personal wounding, I guess.
Yeah. I think it makes sense that they feel this way. I mean, I'm imagining myself with like my kids parenting differently than me and feeling like a sense of rejection if they do it totally different. Like, but wait a minute, like, so I think it makes sense that they feel that way. And I wish I had like a great solution for like what parents should do. But I mean, I don't know, like, I think it's worth like having a conversation saying like, I feel like you were really good parents and I'm, the world has changed and I'm doing things a little differently now. And like,
yeah, I think just underlining that, like, I feel you were great parents, but also this. I mean, sometimes you have to fib a little because there's always something that your parents did that, like, kind of messed you up a little bit.
Yeah.
And
right.
But that's part of too of like the norms changing. Like you do. I think that the highest compliment you can give a parent is like they really did do the best that they could. And sometimes we misapply that to every single parent and say like every parent did the best that they could, and it's not true, right? And so if that, it does seem like something that is available to you to say to your parents, to be like, you were great parents, you did the best that you could. Now we have like slightly different information, and this is how I'm trying to do it now. I think that's a great way to think about it.
I think it is. Yeah. I mean, then the world is different. Like, so our parenting has to be different.
Totally.
Right? Yeah.
The Culture Study Podcast is brought to you by Ollie. Ollie delivers clean, fresh nutrition in 5 drool-worthy flavors. Like, I'm not kidding. The dogs really do drool when you open this up, even for the pickiest eaters. It's made in U.S. kitchens with the highest quality human-grade ingredients. Ollie's food contains no fillers, no preservatives, just real food. This past week, Bev got an abscess in her like neck, throat area. Who knows what caused it? But they needed to make sure that she ate her food so that she could eat antibiotics. By the way, she's totally fine now. You know what made her eat her food? Giving her some Ollie. Mm-hmm. It's irresistible.
I have an inverse recommendation along these lines in that on Saturday, Polly woke up yelping and just being like really lethargic, really weird. And I was just trying to keep an eye on her. And when I served her Ollie and she didn't even sniff it and walked away,
you knew.
I knew it was time to go to the vet.
You knew. That's the thing. That's how strong the pull of Ollie is. The other thing that I cannot get over is the fact that, like, unlike the cans of food, you do not have to, like, scrape out all of the inside and then, like, try to rinse it so it can go in the recycling and then your hands smell like dog food. Like, I love the packaging so much. It just very easily comes apart, and then you put any leftovers in the cute little Ollie box thing that it comes with, and it even has like a scoop, a dedicated little scoop for it that's the perfect size. I love it.
And it's like the texture of pate, so you're not getting like slop and gloop everywhere.
There's no gloop.
No, gloop free.
And also, you can see the benefits of Ollie. Like, I really mean this. Like, their hair looks better. Their poops are smaller because they're eating less crap. Ollie offers 3 meal plans that you can choose from. So you can have like the full fresh plan for fancy dogs. You can have the fresh topper plan if you just want to put a little bit on top, or the mixed plan. They also have treats and supplements. Dogs deserve the best, and that means fresh, healthy food. Head to ollie.com/culture, tell them all about your dog, and use the code CULTURE to get 60% off your welcome kit when you subscribe today. Plus, they'll offer a happiness guarantee on the first box, so if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back. That's OLLIE.com/culture and enter code CULTURE to get 60% off your first box. Today's episode is sponsored by Article. I'm going to talk about my bar cart. I've talked about it somewhat before, but it's just the perfect size. It's the perfect color of wood, and it's the perfect price. I looked all over for a bar cart that would serve my needs, that would have like space for my bottles of alcohol on top, but then also all of my cookbooks on the bottom. And it is just incredibly elegant and lovely. And it's such a great example of the sort of thing that you would find at Article. They make it easy to create a stylish and long-lasting home at an unbeatable price. Like, that's a key element here. Is the stuff that you buy from them lasts. It's not stuff that, in 2 years, like, I don't know, it's like off kilter and you have to buy another one. And this is like new to my brain, that you can buy furniture and it actually lasts. They have a bunch of different styles. There's mid-century modern, which is kind of the style of my bar cart. And there's Scandi-inspired stuff, like there's all different types of wood. I don't know, it just all appeals to me. And they take a ton of care in curating their collection. So everything is high quality. It doesn't look like everything else out there. It also comes beautifully packaged. And it's really easy to put stuff together if it doesn't come already assembled. And comes really fast, too. Most places, you have to wait like several months for something to get to you.
Yeah, you got a lot of stuff during the pandemic for that reason, right? Because it was just like in stock, ready to go.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You can also get support when you need it if you have any questions about design or about like how the piece will arrive or how much assembly is required. They have support that's available 7 days a week. And they have a 30-day satisfaction guarantee. So you can shop knowing that if you're not completely in love with your new furniture, you can easily return it. Right now, Article is offering our listeners $50 off your first purchase of $100 or more. To claim, you just go to article.com/culture and the discount will be automatically applied at checkout. That's article.com/culture for $50 off your first purchase of $100 or more. Our last question before we get to the Ask Ann Anything is about not just extracurriculars, but also the way that people talk about extracurriculars. This question comes from Anna.
There's this ongoing conversation about overscheduling children, but then also a celebration in so many ways of all the skills that children gain by extracurricular activities. My older daughter has ASD and has always required a lot of downtime, and my younger daughter experiences some significant anxiety, and it can be difficult to find an activity in which she can participate happily. As a result, my family developed a slower pace than many around us. Now, as older elementary school students, both daughters sometimes feel left out or they don't have their quote-unquote thing. And adults at work, especially, I feel a common small talk question is, what do your kids do? It feels so alienating for me with a family who hasn't fit into the normal sports paradigm. I'm never sure how to respond. I also feel some of the strain of parenting in a different social class than that in which I grew up, and I'm wondering if I'm not adequately preparing my children. For context, I work in academia in a large metropolitan area in the Midwest.
What does this make you think of when you hear this story?
So I think we talk a lot about the skills that kids gain from extracurriculars, but we do not talk enough about the skills that kids gain by not being so overscheduled.
Yeah.
Right. And so sometimes we have to zoom out and think about like the ways in which our parenting and our kids' childhoods are preparing them for their future and their well-being in the future. And when kids are hyper involved in structured activities, like they're always around adults who are telling them what to do, curating their environments, like ensuring that they're comfortable and well attended to. But like, there's a couple different ways in which when we leave kids to their own devices and don't schedule them in these like adult-led activities, they can actually be better off in the long run. We know that like free play, I talk a lot about this in my new book, like free play, downtime, having lots of like leisure time, that is really important for developing all sorts of skills. Like, and self-esteem, like being left to your own devices, being given independence, being bored, like you're going to develop all sorts of problem solving skills and social skills. If you're just like hanging out with kids without adults around, that can honestly be more valuable sometimes in the long run. In my book, I talked about how I was like a hyper scheduled kid, and I cannot blame my parents. Like, I tried to figure this out in therapy, but like I did it to myself, honestly. And then I realized like, 5 or 6 years ago, I was just deeply unhappy and I didn't even know like what I liked, what I wanted.
Yep.
And then I did a bunch of research. I talked to leisure researchers, which I did not know.
Oh my gosh, there is so much great leisure like history.
Yes.
It's so great. Yeah.
It was so great. And I looked at the research on like kids who have more leisure time and like how they fare compared to kids who don't have as much. And like kids, when they have more time, like downtime, leisure time, they have the opportunity to like discover for themselves what they actually like doing. It's like really helpful for like identity discovery and exploration. And we know that adults who had more time for leisure as kids tend to be more playful, like embrace leisure more, have a better work-life balance. Like they're just better at like
know how to chill. Like, this is the big difference I see in my life is like people who know how to chill and people who don't. And by chill, I don't just mean like relax on the couch and scroll your phone. I mean like really feel like, like we're just doing stuff. Like maybe I'll like meander, like behave like a retiree essentially. And I know that sometimes like people interpret that as like, oh, it must be nice to be so rich. And it's not rich people, right? It's people who don't understand themselves as an optimization machine who should always be doing something.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And I do struggle. Like I'm not good at chilling and I've never have been. I'm getting a little better now. I'm like figuring myself out, but I'm also 46. Like I kind of wish this had happened earlier in my life. Maybe when I was a kid would have been good. But yeah, there's this whole research on like kids can learn this like leisure repertoire, they say, if they have more downtime as kids. And that's so valuable for like their happiness and well-being forever. And like, I think also we need to keep in mind that there are downsides to having too many extracurriculars. And I did a whole 3-part series on extracurriculars a couple years ago in my Substack. And like, we know that like the busier kids are with these structured activities, the less time they have for their social lives, for play, for even for homework, for sleep. Like, God, kids are chronically sleep deprived. I
was just going to tip us to talking a little bit more about the neurodivergence and anxiety too. Like, a lot of these kids' activities are not structured for like different ways that kids' brains work. They are for like people whose brains work like in a like, okay, let's do this regimented activity where everyone does the same thing and then we go on to the next thing really quickly.
There's virtually no flexibility in a lot of these activities. Yeah. I mean, and often like there's not enough, it's the adults in charge may not like have the knowledge or the ability, like they might not have enough staff like to be able to accommodate differences in need. And it can be a real problem. And so I think too, and if you force kids into these structured activities and it's just not, right for them and their temperament or their brains or whatever it is, their bodies, then that can be, I think, also a really big risk. I was talking to my kids last night. They just had field day, yesterday, and I was like, oh my God, the trauma of field day. I was awful at sports. Like
I hated it.
I realized as an adult, I learned from an optometrist that like I don't have any depth perception in my eyes. I didn't know this growing up, but it was such a relief to learn because I was terrible at like ball sports. I was always the last picked for every PE team. And I felt this like deep sense of shame. And that is not great for kids to be experiencing if they're forced into activities or they're in activities in which it's just, they can't be accommodated and their differences, you know, feel like failures. And that's not good for anybody.
This makes me feel great because, so I'm left-handed and I was the only left-handed person in my class because it was still like the tail end of left-handers essentially being like acknowledged in the world. It was the emergence of the first generations of proud left-handers. And so there was no left-handed mitt and I never learned how to like catch a ball. So I got hit in the face a lot. And, yeah, that just like traumatized me towards sports. And I think a lot about this story from when I was in third grade. I had signed up to do soccer, in part because I wanted to, because my friends were doing it, in part because my mom was like, yeah, it'd be good for you to do like something that's a group sport. And I had so much anxiety over doing it. I wouldn't have known to call it anxiety at the time. I felt shy. I felt like I didn't want to do it. I locked myself in the bathroom. And my parents were like, no, you have to do it. Like, you have to do this because you signed up for the team. And in hindsight, it's really important that I showed up and I played and that I did that season. And like, I challenged myself in these ways that like, I was a real perfectionist and only liked doing things that I was very good at immediately. But part of the reason that that particular parenting strategy worked for me was that I wasn't a neurodivergent kid, right? Like it was like a particular strategy that cannot be universalized. It may or may not work for your kid. And I think that's part of the hard thing here is this understanding of like parenting, like good parenting as one way of parenting instead of like almost a modality of like good parenting is like figuring out what works for your kids. And sometimes that means challenging and pushing boundaries and sometimes it doesn't. And I just like this mom, I just want to be like, seems like you're really in touch with your kids. That's cool.
That's the most important thing. I mean, that's the thing about parenting advice. Like there's never a one size fits all piece of parenting advice, you know, and like, plus all the research is like done on mostly like white, wealthy, populations.
Totally.
Like there's so much we don't know. And so, yeah, we absolutely like should listen to our instincts and pay attention to what our gut is telling us about what our kids can handle and what's best for them. And sometimes that's going to go directly against what we're being told we should do as parents by everybody around us. But like, we've got to be strong and listen to that voice, but it's really hard.
Okay, so we have 2 more questions along these lines, and they're specifically about sports, one of my favorite things to talk about, kids' sports. And we're going to make them into the AAA segment this week, which means that they're just for paid subscribers. So if you want our thoughts on navigating kids' sports culture, head to culturestudypod.substack.com and become a paid subscriber. This has been so fantastic. I would love to have you on the show again because these questions are never ending. If people want to find more of your work, where should they look right now?
My website, which is melindawennermoyer.com. And you can sign up for my Substack there or order links for my book are on there. And books, I should say. So yeah, thank you. This was so fun.
Thank you so much for listening to the Culture Study Podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We have so many great episodes in the works, and I promise you don't want to miss any of them. If you want to suggest a topic, ask a question about the culture that surrounds you, or submit a question for our subscriber-only advice time segment, check the show notes for a link to our Substack. If you want to support the show and get bonus content, head to culturestudypod.substack.com. It's $5 a month or $50 a year, and you'll get ad-free episodes, an exclusive advice time segment, weekly discussion threads for each episode, and a link to a special Google form so that your questions go to the front of the line. The Culture Study Podcast is produced by me, Anne Helen Peterson, and Melody Rowell. Our music is by Poddington Bear. You can find me on Instagram at Anne Helen Peterson, Melody at Melodious47, and the show at Culture Study Pod. Thank you so much for your support.